Hello again everyone and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the scariest city you've ever been to? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. At the height of the Iraq War, it was still listed as more dangerous. The gangs ran the city, driving around in technicals with mounted machine guns. Hotels had 6-foot-thick concrete wall fences with razor wire and armed guards. For an added cost, they offered R cages that would drop down over your bed when a sensor was triggered to protect you from being R'd if people broke in. Port-au-Prince. Saw a newly shot woman on the sidewalk and the next day, a human finger in a trash heap. The doorman in my hotel in Johannesburg stopped me as I was walking out and told me, "You won't last 5 minutes out there. Go back to your room where it's safe." Kingston, Jamaica. I switched hotels to one more secure. Early on my last morning, I was going to the airport and my original hotel was on fire. Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea again. Every property is surrounded by solid fences topped with razor wire, and if you can afford it, patrolled by armed guards and guard dogs. As a visitor, you should never use a local taxi or walk outside your hotel compound at night. Rizhao, China. Not scary so much like the others. China is insanely safe but extremely creepy. I felt like I was on a movie set. First off, it's a city of 500,000, but it's built for a population of 10 million. But it's not like those ghost cities out west where there never was anyone. It seemed like it was actually a big city, but everyone just left suddenly. The beaches were well maintained and empty. The buses ran frequently and were empty. The streets were lined with all the usual Chinese stuff and were empty. We went into a breakfast restaurant and the food was great, but we were the only customers and the staff seemed surprised to see us. We asked for directions to the famous fish market. No one there could tell us where it was. It turned out to be about 750 meters away. It was massive and filled with vendors selling huge quantities of incredibly fresh fish. It was mostly empty. Also, almost everything was open until the wee hours of the morning, if not 24 hours. This is unusual even in the biggest Chinese cities, let alone this abandoned town. It was just an unsettling experience all around. Juarez, Mexico. I'm Irish and Mexican, redhead. Went with cousins to see my aunt and uncle. At the time, '07, it was the most murderous city on earth. My family members were in a cartel. There was a cartel war going on. Had armed men all around at all times. For all the money and cars and opulence at their home, it was like being in prison. The tension in the air was thick. I was treated like a king, but that whole week I was terrified inside. Different world. Was told no matter what happens, do not call the police. They worked for the other guys. I was told that if shit kicked off and anyone made it through the gates, to grab a gun and shoot myself. That would be the best possible outcome. I haven't been back. I ended up driving through this tiny town in the middle of Nevada that I assumed used to be a mining town. It looked like a steady paycheck hadn't been seen in this town for 20 years. The houses were all dilapidated, and the locals looked just as worn out. Bullet holes and burn marks could be seen on pretty much every building. The only reason I drove through the town instead of just sticking to the main road was to top up on gas, but I couldn't find anything, not even a small convenience store. It must have been hell for those folks considering the closest town with an actual store and gas was around 70 miles away. St. Louis. It was weird for a few reasons, but the scariest was when I was leaving the hotel myself, my mom, and my 2 large dogs were staying at. We saw a man messing with my car, like the hood was propped. As I started raising my voice and approaching with my large barking dogs, he ran. I made sure to push the hood down so it would latch, or so I thought. We loaded the car up and drove away as fast as possible. As soon as we got on the freeway, the hood blew up and almost hit the windshield. I honestly have no idea how it didn't. Maybe a safety feature? So I had to pull over and re-secure it. Mofo obviously messed something up on purpose because he pulled up behind us. I got back in the car, My dogs and mom losing their shit. Drove slowish, put my hazards on, and my mom called 911. He sped off after taking pics. Weirdest experience of my life. The hotel was so sketchy, and my intuition was telling me to leave the entire time. I honestly think the man was in on something with the hotel staff, or was hotel staff himself. My two dogs were extremely on edge, and they're generally easygoing. Plate numbers were stolen, and police couldn't or wouldn't do anything. I'm not sure this counts, but I drove through Gary, Indiana recently. It was effing weird. I've never seen many abandoned homes and buildings. The neighborhoods were decrepit and deserted. I didn't see anything shady happen, but it was effing weird. I was diverted there by my GPS when returning to Chicago from Michigan while driving on 90. I got stopped at a train crossing when the train came to a complete stop. I said, nope, and drove back to the highway. I'd rather sit in bumper-to-bumper traffic through purgatory than have to drive through Gary again. Cairo in Egypt. As a white non-Muslim female, the amount of sexual harassment I experienced was unprecedented. It's interesting because I didn't necessarily worry about someone attacking me or stealing from me, but I worried about other things happening. The entire country is impoverished and corrupt. At one point I saw a police officer hold a child, like 7 years old maybe, at gunpoint because the child was acting out and he thought it was funny. At another point, a person got hit by a car and a couple of bystanders were doing everything they could while most kept on walking as if nothing was even happening. I was at a restaurant near there and it took over 30 minutes for an ambulance to get there. I'm unsure if he made it. I can't even tell you how many homeless children I saw begging for food or money with no parents anywhere to be found. I've been to other countries where this is a common scam tactic, but this was totally different. The reality is that when a country is that corrupt, public safety goes out the window. This is actually what scared me most about it. I have treated and traveled to lots of places in this world. The most scared I've ever been was lost in downtown Baltimore at night on a weekend. I have made a series of mistakes trying to go around the city and had accidentally taken a spur that put me right into downtown. I have no clue what area of town I drove through, but the only human beings that I saw out and about at 3 in the morning looked like zombies. It's really hard to describe, but the way that they moved, the way that they looked at me as I drove by, it was very scary. Out of desperation, this was way before cell phones did anything more than phone calls and basic texts. I was still using a paper atlas. I stopped at a 7-Eleven. I was waiting in line to ask for directions, and a guy went out of his way to ask me what I was doing there. That's how much I stood out. I told him that I was trying to get directions to get back onto the highway, and he told me that he was an undercover cop. Things were about to go down right there, and I needed to leave. I told him that's what I'm trying to do. He thought about it for a second, told me to get in my car, follow him, and try to keep up. He would get me to an on-ramp and then go back to the store. He drove like a bat out of hell and did get me out to the freeway and then busted a U-turn and flew away. I have no clue how bad my night would have been continued to be if he hadn't been there and guided me out of there. Yeah, Baltimore is like a really nice area. In or around Camden Yards is like really nice, but it's a tough town to be out late at night in, so yeah. New Orleans. I loved it, but right outside the touristy areas gets a little sketchy, including the guy on drugs who broke into our hotel. Also cut himself crawling through the glass window and bled all over the hotel trying to kick people's doors in. Food was good though. I went to college in a city in central New York primarily run by the mafia. It was ranked as one of the 10 safest cities in the US at the time. You could walk anywhere as long as you didn't interfere. In the 4 years I was there were 3 murders. A guy who turned state's evidence was shot in a crowded bar, but no one saw or heard anything. Another locked himself in the trunk of their burning car. It was ruled a suicide. And someone jumped into the river in midwinter. Another suicide. Nuevo Laredo, Texas. Not all, but whatever part of San Bernardino I got off the freeway at night to stop at a gas station to call my sisters for directions. When I told her my cross streets, she said, "Get back on the freeway right now." I looked up, and the crackheads were circling my car and tapping on my window. Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. Almost got robbed literally 100 feet outside the airport, walking to a cab. Luckily, I saw police, and my instincts made me shout hard, which made the police aware, and the thieves fled the scene. Almost lost my brand new Nikon back in the day. I'm laughing at all the American cities listed here. Canadian cities get straight up guffaws. It was Guatemala City for me, but that's just because the driving was terrifying. The buses were awesome though. My travel companion, who has worked all over the world as an Army Ranger and DoD employee, would not allow us to leave the hotel after dark. That said, visiting Tikal was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. Highly recommended. Wonderful people and incredibly affordable. I have a friend from Honduras, and the stories he has shared are nightmare fuel. He would sit in the hospital while his dad was dying of cancer and regularly see MS-13 members coming in missing arms from machete attacks. Baltimore again. There was a few years ago at a convention. I was told to not stay more than a block from the hotel that was in the nicest area downtown. Later in the day, when riding in a taxi, I asked the driver if this was good advice, and he agreed. He immediately turned and pointed to the street corner while we were stopped at a red light, and said a man was shot in the back of the head in the middle of the day in front of the nicest mall in town. Bahnhof Vivital in Frankfurt, Germany. I've lived, worked in some of the roughest places in the U.S., Baltimore, Detroit, etc. That section of Frankfurt is the only place that has legitimately scared me since moving to Europe 15 years ago. Open-air drug market, prostitution, addicts, scammers, pickpockets, wild place. Honorable mention to the cab driver in Belgrade who sussed out I was American and took the scenic route to my hotel to show me all the buildings that were blown up by American bombs like it was my fault. Albuquerque, New Mexico. I dropped off a U-Haul there and got an Uber to a sketchy hotel chosen for its proximity to the airport. Not having my own transportation made me very anxious. At the hotel, the line of people, meth heads, I assumed, in front of me couldn't provide a credit card for a room, so the line got short real quick. The small, weird elevator had bloodstains nearby, so I took the stairs. I'd given my Uber driver $10 to let me stop and get food so I wouldn't have to leave until it was time to go to the airport. I went to the room with my bags and food and looked at everything and wished for more locks. The food was great. I lived on the south side of Atlanta for 4 years and never felt this sketched out, though I did get my carry permit in Atlanta. Nothing like East Street St. Louis apparently, but that's my story. East Berlin before the wall came down. I went as part of a tour, but I was hyper aware of my active duty status and scared the whole time that I'd be frog marched into the van and whisked away. The whole place that we were allowed to see was gray and gritty and depressing AF. The people looked away or looked depressed. It was just kind of tragic. I was separated from my family on our vacation to Florida, and I got stuck in New York City for a few days. Was chased around the city by criminals, was startled by a terrifying old lady covered with pigeons in the park, was teased by what presumed to be prostitutes. I thought I was safe in my hotel, but even the staff treated me like a criminal and tried to have me arrested. You should buy some turtle doves. I once accidentally crossed the wrong border from Thailand traveling to Laos. I ended up in a place called the Special Economic Zone of the Golden Triangle. No data, couldn't speak the language, nothing. I ended up in some weird hotel that looked like a jail cell. I managed to book a 36-hour bus journey out of there for the next day. That evening I went for a walk around. I was offered child prostitutes, and when I realized how extremely dangerous this place was, I went back to my room and went to sleep. The next morning, police raided my room with guns pointed to my head. I later learned the only real reason any Westerner would ever travel there is because they haul mass amounts of opium out of there, so I was a suspected drug dealer. Also, I accidentally pissed some guy off who I assume was a gangster, so I don't know if that had some part to play. Terrifying. Now, I sometimes get questioned at airports because of my travel history. Belize City. The airport is located there. I reserved a hotel room at Golden Bay, planning on taking shuttle boats to nearby islands. The hotel was nothing like the pictures presented online. It was under massive construction. I requested a waterfront room. My view was nothing but scaffolding, pipes, and drywall, and so noisy. The rooftop restaurant was closed. Okay, so I decided to walk around and explore. Not recommended. Buildings half torn down in total disarray. Street gangs, graffiti, busted up sidewalks, just really the pits. I needed to go to the post office the next day. I didn't feel safe walking 4 blocks, so I took a taxi.